But some of these kids were the nicest, sweetest, most caring, kind kids you would ever come across. And I would have conversations with the parent. They are struggling. I struggled in school. When I would talk with the parents, I would say, you have the battle won because you're raising a child that is going to be a good person. Theodore Roosevelt quote, it was in my office, and it was, to educate a man in mind and not morals is to educate a menace to society.
Hey, before we jump into the podcast, we want to thank all our donors and supporters who make the Today Count show possible. It's through your generosity that we're able to shape leaders through this content in this podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you find yourself coming across this content. All right, let's get to the podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Today Counts show. I am your host, Jim Piper. You know, saying this phrase doesn't sound right. I'm excited to talk about, and because actually, I don't know if excited is the right word. Today, we're going to, school's about to start. School has started. And, there's a lot of mental health issues that we are facing around this country. And it's across the board. I recognize that, the young, the old. But this particular discussion has to do with education, our school systems, what the kids are facing today, what parents are facing today, what we're all facing today, because we're all in this together. So today I have gathered here again. I think this is the third episode that we have dedicated to education in general, but really drilling down today on mental health. I think I'm going to try to we might chase a rabbit here and there, but mental health is what we're going to be talking about today. So let me just introduce our guest. I have with me today Rachel Starmer. Rachel is a psychotherapist and she specializes in trauma, and that will come to play. We'll be talking about acute situations, chronic situations. So Rachel, welcome. I'm glad that you're joining us today.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
And of course, if you have listened to the previous episodes, I can almost call him my co-host now, Mr. Dr. Brian Baddick, who is a assistant superintendent out there in Philadelphia. And welcome back, Brian.
Good to see you, Jim. Thank you so much. Good to see Dan with us today, who's coming up, and Rachel, who's here with us. And it's great to be back with you again, Jim. We've been talking about this topic for quite some time. And, it's a continuation, and I think it needs to be. So this is good timing today.
Good. Have you done any fishing lately, Brian?
It's the weather up here in Pennsylvania has been a little bit hot. It's a little too hot. I actually been doing a little bit more biking, Jim. Getting the bike out a little bit more, the rod's down a little bit, but just exercising, enjoying the temps, and so looking forward to some fall fishing now, certainly.
Good. And then last but not least, we have Mr. Danny Fox, who just, as I understand it, recently retired as a school counselor. And you've got like 30-something years as a teacher, administrator, counselor. Did I get that right?
Yeah, half my career, 17 years as a teacher, and half as a school counselor, all at the elementary level, K to 5.
Okay, that is beautiful. Again, guys, thank you very much. And again, for those who don't know, my background is extremely eclectic. It is the first decade in the business banking world, transition into youth ministry, police chaplain work, pastoring churches out west. And about, I'm not sure, I don't want to do math in my head yet, so I'm just going to throw out some numbers. 15 to 20 years ago, I started the Lead Today community, which is an organization dedicated to coming alongside leadership in all capacities. The Today Count show was started a couple of years ago, only got serious about it about a year ago. And so anyway, that's kind of us and where we're at. So here's what I want to do, guys. I've prepared some questions to get us started. And the first one, and I've already added some attitude in it. And, and so here it comes. Would someone please share with us what is the definition, or is there a definition of a mentally fit student and or young adult? And the reason why I'm a little, sarcastic in that is because, sometimes I wonder if it's overdone, and sometimes I wonder if we're paying too much attention to it, not enough attention to it. And of course, I'm pulling out the old man card, right? I drank from a garden hose, all that kind of stuff. But, but what would you say is the definition of a mentally fit student or young adult?
Well, I'll take a stab. And I did a little Googling or a little research, and there is a definition of it. And
Let's hear it.
It was a paper done by Paula Robinson, Lindsay Odes, and Peter Caputi, and they defined it as a capacity to use resources and skills to flexibly adapt to challenges or advantages, enabling thriving. And I thought, that sounds pretty good, but I don't think it's quite full enough that talks about sounds to me more like cognitive fitness. And I'm thinking more about emotional, mental, spiritual, relational health, which I think encompasses the capacity to know yourself and be able to express it appropriately, to be able to take the perspective of another as their own perspective, and it doesn't have to be yours, and to see the other as unique, and to be able to connect relationally. And students, young people, and probably all of us are always growing into that. There is no, aha, I have arrived. I have achieved that, and there is no more growth. It is a constant growing process. We are social beings, and so as we are growing, we adults are part of our job as adults is to help, particularly parents, teachers, clergy, those who work with youth. It is our job to help young people develop and grow their capacity.
Yeah, when I heard you read that, I wasn't about to vomit or anything, but it did make me think, gosh, it just feels so stale. It feels so linear. I mean, it's good for an entrepreneur, I guess. It's good that somebody knows how to build a house or to do this or that. But, I had more of the emotional, thoughts in there. I just think about even adults that I have met, that their personality changes wherever their environment is at, which just kind of reeks of insecurity and not understanding themselves, and that can't be good. And I kind of expect that with little kids, a little bit while they try to figure out the difference between, dependency, independency, interdependency, those kinds of things. But what I do like about the definition is the use of, I wrote down skills. Skills, right? Skills is a key word.
None of what I described or was in that definition are things we can't learn.
Right.
We're not born with these capacities, or not born. It's all things that we learn and can develop.
Well, Danny, when you have worked with elementary school kids, I'm really curious about this, because I'm sure you've seen a huge contrast. You've seen kids that seem well adjusted, and then you've seen kids where you're going, what in the world is going on?
Right.
Yeah. What have you learned? What have you learned about that contrast?
There's so much there. I've thought about your question, and I kind of pulled back, almost like as I'm looking down from the atmosphere, big picture kind of thing. And I think to myself that kids need to be adaptable to their environment. They need to be able to work with others, negotiate with others. They need to have friendship skills, a lot of those social kinds of things. And when I look at the big picture, I just see that our society has gone in a different direction, that it's made it harder for young kids to be able to do those things today. That's where I see the difficulties coming from.
What about and Rachel's definition might have hit on this. Maybe it was just written by people who are not, who are not so relational, but what about conflict resolution? The recognition that conflict is normal.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like there is, there's the kid that will literally follow other people off a cliff. Then there's the kid that will say, wait a second, this is stupid. I'm not going to do this. And then there's that compromising, kid, and who knows how many other categories, right? I'm just making this up top of my head.
Sure.
But when do you see conflict resolution, all three of you, do you see that as something that is a very important part of what we're talking about today? And if it's lacking, why is it lacking? Because I just noticed working with adults in leadership that somewhere they skipped through life somehow believing that if there's conflict, the whole world is coming to an end, right? And it's fight or flight kind of approach, and versus a listening, agreeing where you can agree, all those old cliches. What is this a hill to die on? All those kinds of things. How soon do you see that developing or not developing in the lives of little ones? Or do you? Is it too early to tell when they're at that age?
Let Rachel go first, and then I have something I want to say about
Okay.
it.
Well, I think one of the difficulties that is one of the approaches that has taken a hold these days that is not helping people develop conflict, healthy approaches to conflict, is adult monitoring. Like when I was a kid, and where all of us probably were kids, there were not adults to help us figure out like how we made up our rules, how to, like when somebody broke the rules, how to figure that out. These days, there are adults monitoring kids all the time. And so when kids get into a squabble, adults swoop in and say, no, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Be nice. Be nice to each other. Kids don't learn how to work it out themselves and that it's okay. And so I work with a lot of people who are very conflict avoidant, and a lot of times, especially when I'm working with couples, their experience is, well, I don't know how to do it. I never saw my parents fight, or my parents were the other extreme. We were always, like nowadays, we were always told what to do. So we don't know what to do. So we have to learn.
Yeah, go ahead, Danny.
Okay.
But you guys don't let me forget to tell you my baseball story because of what the both of you brought up.
Okay. And Rachel kind of opened the door for me there again, because I'm kind of like looking big picture and changes in society. And again, I'm an old guy. When I went into school counseling and I went to graduate school at East Tennessee State back in the 90s, I remember, my mentor giving me advice and on how to help kids. And he would have never imagined the world that we had the last half of my career with iPhones and technology and all of that. And it is truly a different world. So what Rachel was just saying, how people are conflict avoidant, the kids don't know how to work things out. I think about my first year as a teacher, and I can remember kids out at recess, and they would play. And these are elementary kids, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and they would play imaginative games. They're pretending that they're dinosaurs and, going around growling at each other and, being invisible and different kinds of imaginative games. But fast forward to 2012, 2013, and that wasn't happening out at recess anymore. There were none of those imaginative kind of games. And when I talk with kids, it's either one way or the other. Some kids have no structure and there's nothing going on, and they need a lot of help and guidance. But there's other kids that are just so regimented that every hour of the day and everything is regimented and controlled, whether it's from a team sport to a club or what have you. And kids aren't outside playing just together, making up a game, creating the rules and negotiating, that was fair, no, it was out, or that kind of thing. They're not having those interactions. They're not doing conflict resolution. That's why at my job, I had to do a lot of that, teaching that in the school, how to have conflict resolution, because they were not doing that in their regular lives.
Well, I think you guys are probably discerning, where I'm coming from. I'm just thinking that if some of the results of what we're seeing today is this inability to not just have conflict resolution skills, but again, I'm repeating myself, but to recognize that getting up every day is conflict. I mean, conflict is normal. It's just part of our lives. The story I was going to tell you is because I did not grow up in that kind of home. So here comes the old guy stories again. But I was in Tennessee. I don't know if I was fifth grade or it was something like that. And a little town in Tennessee. We're on vacation to visit family, and the biggest thing going on in town was a little league baseball game. Like a lot of little league, I think still today, when there's a foul ball hit and you go get that ball, you can bring it to the the snack bar and get yourself whatever, an ice cream or whatever. So sure enough, there's a foul ball, and I go after that foul ball, and I get there just about the time of this other boy who was had a sizable advantage. And, next thing I know, we're in a scuffle, right? I don't know that I would call it a fight, but I'd call it certainly a scuffle. I mean, we were getting dirty. I probably had a scab on my elbow. I mean, we were going at it. And as I looked around, there was a circle of boys and girls, watching. And to my surprise, one of the spectators was my dad. And I remember thinking to myself, well, what the heck? Why is my dad, just standing by? And I don't even remember whether I got that ball or not, but believe it or not, I think because I was so taken back by that, I think my dad, whether he realized it or not, raised me to be probably more on the independent side, than anything else. And maybe that's affected some of my interpersonal skills, as I have gotten older. But that's the one thing I'd like us to kind of keep in the background as we talk about conflict. Let me take another step. We talked about this offline. I think it was last week. And what I did with you guys is I kind of made you go back to 1970 something, when I was revisiting my anxieties, and I made a list of some things. I remember as a young teenager, I had anxiety triggers that were there because I had concerns over the Cold War. I was in classes now where we were actually talking about government and politics and civics, I think it was called. And so a young man not lacking in imagination, I literally saw these missiles, that were pointed toward us and us towards them. And I remember in my adolescent faith praying to God. I was praying to God as a teenager, and they were very adolescent prayers, I guess. God help none of this to happen until I'm 16 so I can get my driver's license. And then it turned to 18, so forth. Girls and the whole social arena. I was short in stature, so that was an insecurity there, and laced with anxiety. Sports. I love sports, so a lot of my emotions were spent on sports. School was never hard for me, but in high school I wasn't a very good student. I just like having fun. I like working and making money, having fun. So all of my assignments would be turned in at the 11th hour. My test, I did that by a wing and a prayer, just by trying to listen well in class. So, grades, I was the eldest of four. The eldest has a different kind of anxiety and expectations placed upon there. One thing that I did do well, I think, is I didn't really let the world tell me what was next. So I didn't have the what's next anxiety, but I did have more of the, oh goodness, I'm all by myself here in what's next. But there's nothing on here about social media. There's nothing, on here about helicopter parents. There's nothing on here about that. How did my childhood anxiety, how does that contrast with what you guys have seen students go through today? And let's throw the parents in there too.
Jim, I want to just ask you this question. Who did your assignments back then? Did you do your assignments? Who did you copy off of on that desk? No.
My mom would get so upset with me because I would never bring books home. And this is not anything to brag about, but I was one of those students that I was an audio learner, visual learner, and if dear God, if I studied, oh my goodness. I just, now, my GPA wasn't anything to write home about. But yeah, I just was able to fake it, I guess.
Let me throw this out to the group. And as I'm listening to what Rachel and Danny had to say and listening to your story a little bit. And, I want to go to talk about profile. You talk about what does a profile look like of a student today or a young adult or someone that's in the secondary level in education or post-secondary. I mean, you just gave a good glimpse into your life of what your profile was like. And your parents they helped you develop and establish your profile. And what you just described is you just, okay, I kind of have the same ideas of who Jim was back then. And with profiles, it's the same thing parents have to do today is identify who their kids are, who is in the household with them. What is the profile of their child or children? And you, like me, like Dan, like Rachel here, we didn't have the technology. We didn't have things that are going on today, obviously. And, we, as Dan just mentioned about the dinosaurs, we did the same similar things out in our backyard too. I'm the youngest of four boys. But we leaned on, let's say, I'm going to call them paradigms, Jim. A paradigm is going to be like a point of reference. That kind of is like the guardrails. It's like the bumpers on the bowling lane. Those would be things such as, the paradigm of justice, care, critique. Those are things that kind of help keep us in line and kind of collate us a little bit. But what we're not just seeing parents inability to profile their kids and identify their kids. Anything goes today, as we know, and we can't get it. I mean, Rachel's definition is probably something that it's textbook. It's helpful, but it certainly has changed so many times over and over. So it may not even be applicable to what we're discussing and talking about because we're in a different type of family structure. We're in a different type of identification. as I mentioned about paradigms, a fourth paradigm I believe that's coming in to help bumper kids, to help them make decisions, it's going to be artificial intelligence, AI. AI is going to be that new paradigm. Students today in school are able to go on technology, go to anything with any sort of screen time, and they're going to be able to identify a problem and come up with a solution, not on their own. It's going to be delivered through, let's say, artificial intelligence. Now, back to your story, back then, the intelligence that you had was, okay, I want that ball. I guess I'm going to have to fight for it. And that's how it was. And it's not like that anymore. We're just in a completely different time. I think that's really important as parents think about it. We miss the old days. We're going to miss the old days. But I think what's happening now is the paradigms that are coming in, the families that are coming into the students is not going to be a human connection to it. It's going to be artificial, and that's going to determine how you make your decisions and how you're going to lead your life and live your life. And it's for some it's fortunate, some it's unfortunate, but we're seeing that dramatic shift right now. It's really, in my opinion, we're losing that human being. We're losing the art and the artifact in teaching today because we're losing that connection. And I think that's something to really consider when we look at profile, when families are looking at their children or their child, and as you're getting ready for the school year, is how is your child making decisions? Where are they going for those decisions? Who's helping them walk through that? Are they going to be able to be resilient? Are they going to be able to self-regulate themselves and their emotions to be able to calm down and make a decision? Or is it going to be chaotic, and is it going to be anxious and depression? But yeah, I mean that's kind of how I relate to what you just said. Is wow, that's what a time machine we can sit, the four of us, talk about way back then when we were kids, how we did things, and how it's so different now today, and even the structure emotionally and spiritually of families and kids has really come a long way since then.
I hear what you're saying, Brian, but I also think there are some there's the in many ways there are some frameworks that are the same, regardless of when we grow up. We are struggling with acceptance always as we're growing up, acceptance with our peers, and we're struggling with for independence. Like, do we want to be independent from our parents? That tension between acceptance and authenticity and independence is that's a timeless tension that we struggle with, all from the very beginning, I think. And it's how we, it's just the various contexts around that sort of connect to that. And I think because we are created as social beings, there is this, with our technology, there is this pull away from, particularly, like the smartphones and things. There's a pull away from relationships, and at the same time, which creates anxiety. But at the same time, we have anxiety because we want relationships.
Yeah,
We are,
I agree with you on that. I agree. And you're hitting it right on. This is a really good topic, and your definition of that profile, what it looks like. I think we're going to add to that, or maybe redefine what profile looks like of someone. And you're absolutely. Danny sees it. I see it. You're seeing it. I'm Jim. I'm sure you're seeing it in your grandkids too. Is I'm anxious to as Rachel just said. Great point. So they're sandwiched between. They're in the middle of it, but it's an anxiety sandwich. How's that, Rachel?
Mhm. Yeah. And I just want to share this. I read a really interesting article, and I think it was in the Atlantic, where somebody had done a study, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who had done this study, but they had talked to a number of high schoolers and middle schoolers about their phone use. And they found that the kids were getting online, using their phone to connect with each other, because it was the only place that they could connect with each other without adult supervision. So it was, in a way, going back to our old sandlot days and running around the neighborhood. And I thought, oh, that is very interesting. It is, from the outside, we see our kids in their bedrooms and but in a way, it's like, oh, I wonder if it is this pull toward relationality without supervision, because we want independence, but we want connection. And it's just, this device is creating tension. And, it's how, as a whole society, how do we work this out?
I was sitting in a lunchroom just yesterday with about 30 people. We're all round tables. I was the eldest by far, and I think it was 6 or 7 texts that I received while I was sitting in that lunchroom around a table from young adults who were in that same room, just asking, basic things. Are you going to be able to make the meeting tomorrow at 4? Did this get delivered? Just the kind of thing that you would just normally ask a person walking by through the hallway. And I'm removing judgment for whether that's right or wrong, but just wondering, how does the change affect what we're talking about? Does it have any relevance or not? Let's go back to vacation. When we were on vacation, we'd be in that VW bus without air conditioning. We'd be in that or that station wagon with the paneling on the side. And, as we would roll into one of the towns to stay the night, we would roll slowly through the one lane town, and we'd be looking for those neon signs that said vacancy. And in some of the more popular area, we would see no vacancy, no vacancy, no vacancy. And, there was just something about that experience that, when we saw a motel that said vacancy, there was cheers in the car, and it was analog. I mean, it was a different day. And, now, nobody does that. I'm not sure there are vacancy or non-vacancy signs anymore. Maybe on Route 66. I don't know. But, when I look at the convenience and all the things that technology does, I do think there's an ironic. You guys were talking about imagination, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because the working title of my next book is Reimagining Leadership, or The Reimagined Leader. And chapter 1 is basically about, where did imagination go? And I'm talking about adults in problem-solving situations. Everybody wants to know what the process is. Everybody wants to know what even best practices, to me, has become something that I am no longer endeared to, because I believe they all have a shelf life. What's best? How long did it take before it became known as a best practice? And then it becomes a best practice. And then after some time, like the bell-shaped curve on the other side of that, a best practice then begins to be questioned, because something else, begins to replace it. So I'm more like scratching my head and trying to understand what's good about it, what's bad about it. I'm mostly afraid of AI than I'm excited about AI. But as I have encountered it and worked with it, I'm going, this is pretty cool. then on the other hand, I've also seen garbage in, garbage out, kind of. So it's just in some cases I hyped up Google. So, I'm just trying to think of my grandkids, 10 years from now. Here are the things that I just get confused about. So without mentioning names or anything, it seems to me that there are more 16-year-olds who do not have driver's license. I'm just going to throw this out. I'm going to throw out a wager. I have no scientific data. I bet you right now in America, there are more 16-year-olds without driver's license, percentage-wise even, obviously maybe numbers, than there ever has been. It's like a conveyor belt. I feel like all these young people are just on a conveyor belt going down the road. They're not even moving their feet. And there's that ambition thing. You see it because they get hired for frontline work. And when you experience them frontline work, if there's training, then all those trainers need to be fired. But there's what's missing in that human connection, that communication. Where is this going? Well, where this is going is, my question is, we're talking about mental health and we're reaching for symptoms, but I don't think we understand why are we struggling with it? I guess is what I'm just confused about.
Jim, let me say two things. Again, I'm going big picture again. But I think about my career, 34 years in education as an elementary teacher and guidance counselor. And I remember, when I would see some of these problems happening with elementary school kids, I would think, oh my gosh, what's this going to be like when they get to the high school? And sure enough, our high school was looking for help. We were hiring, agency counselors to come in because our school counselors were just overloaded. There was just so much going on. But I was seeing this with young kids with the change in our society. And I want to talk about two things. One, of course, is the electronics, the smartphone, all of that. But the other is going back to the No Child Left Behind standardized testing push. And it was basically, everyone is going to attain a certain level. Everyone's going to be taught in this way, very data driven. And it really stomped out the art of teaching for teachers, and it made it into this science, and that we're going to compare everybody to everybody else. And again, I'm talking at the elementary level. I know this is probably the same for middle school, high school, but when I'm talking elementary kids, a 7-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, they need to be creative and they need to be expressive and they need to find what they're good at, what their talents are, what their skills are. Because as we know, not everybody has the same skills. But our whole education system was trying to compress everybody to go down the same avenue. So it was stifling. It was stifling teachers, educators. It was stifling creativity. And gone were the days when we would read a book. One of my favorite books was Shiloh, about a boy who he finds this dog that's being mistreated in West Virginia. He takes it back home. He feeds it, gets it healthy again. But he basically stole it from this guy that was abusing the dog. And you had the moral question of, was it right to steal this dog? And, learning all about West Virginia and the culture there. And when I was teaching that book, we were making dioramas and we were, doing plays on it and doing a debate on, do we keep the dog? Do we come clean? And that was all washed away because we had to attain the standards. So there was no more of that kind of.
How did that happen? How did that happen? Because it smells like money. It smells like business. How did that happen? Now is where the gym comes out. That just really, because my daughter doesn't teach anymore. And though she would have said it in a different way, it had a lot to do with, you can't teach the kids how to think anymore. what the text says is what the text says. It's like
Correct.
it's like the Holy Scriptures.
And
Go ahead.
and not to get political here, because
Get
I think,
political.
well, no, what I want to say is both sides are pointing fingers.
Yeah.
And the point is they're both in it together. No Child Left Behind. Everybody was blaming George W. Bush, but he was just the president. He just signed it into law. It was created by Ted Kennedy, who's a Democrat. So it's Republican and Democrat. I'm not pointing fingers here, but my point is they went down this road. And was it for the testing companies? I don't know, but it changed education. And you had people on both sides, whether it was Democrat or Republican. You had both sides saying, this is what we want to do. We want to attain higher test scores and on and on and on. But it was at the detriment of how to teach kids to be thinkers and to create and to find their talents and their skills and their way. And, you know, when you're caught in the system as a teacher, when this was happening as a teacher, you just, that's what it did. But education changed drastically at that point. Not only did we then just focus so much on math and reading, because that's what was being tested, we lost science and social studies. That it wasn't valued. So we weren't learning who we were. We weren't learning our past. And it just...
Yeah. You're firing me up, Danny.
I'd like to share a story
you better do it quick, Rachel, because I'm getting heated.
It's right in there. So my son is one of those. Well, everybody in my family, I'm one of them too. You know, a different learner, and thankfully, I grew up at a time where I went to a more sort of different school that was trying all sorts of different things, and so the fact that I couldn't spell anything was fine. They were like, please help her study for her spelling test, but her language arts are great. So I got more encouragement, whereas my son, he did not. He would write these beautiful, fabulous, super enthusiastic things and get a 0 on it because it didn't fit the format. And so he was like, I'm not doing it anymore. This was in 2nd grade.
Wow.
And
right.
That just totally, and he was a very astute sort of see the system. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that system. And he just that was devastating for him and created a lot of tension in him of why participate in that? And it affected, for a long time, how he felt about school, and until he got some teachers who were like, you have a lot to say. Please say it. Please do it. I'm not interested in your format.
Yeah, Brian and I have talked about this, and Danny, you brought up what Brian brought up a couple of episodes, ago about the testing, and then Dr. Kristen Meyer, who's been on this show before, she got all bent out of shape, about that as well. And it may, for those listening, it may sound like all we're doing is complaining right now, but just give us some time. We need to,
right.
Get this out. But when you just take some time and think about it, what we're questioning everything, and it's about time that we question everything. I asked Brian last time, I said, is it too late? Is it too late for the public education system? And, Brian did not respond with great enthusiasm, but he did say that he did not believe it is too late. He said there's still a chance. And I think the reason why there is a chance is because of conversations like this that are going beyond, just smashing the teachers. My layman's view of it is that when parents are disengaged, when business, whatever you want to call business, you can call it politics if you want, or you can just call it flat out money, whatever. So if that's on the top and the parents aren't engaged, and then the teachers get smashed. And that's just how I see it from a organizational construct. And I don't have data in front of me, but my neighbor across the street, left elementary school education for what we're talking about. My daughter left. My church is full of ex. 2 weeks ago, we did a back to school prayer blessing for all the children, all of the teachers, all the administrators, parents that were homeschooling, and you know, we didn't throw out this big complaint, but we prayed very specifically because we do believe that this is a mountain, you know, to climb, and society's pushing back. I mean, we've got more unusual schools out there probably than ever that are being started. Some are horrible, some are really good. You know, it's probably always been that way, you know, to some degree. Technology, of course, is ushering itself in to, you know, to enhance that. But, you know, to Rachel's point, you know, I took metal shop, wood shop. They had an auto mechanic shop, which I didn't take, but I did take the wood shop, metal shop, learned a lot of great things, you know, and that.
There have been seasons in my life where I've looked back and I thought, what was that even about? Did I grow in that season? Did I get better? Am I still stuck in that season? If you have similar thoughts, I want to introduce you to a book called Story, The Art of Learning from Your Past. This book, written by Jim Piper, shares principles and stories that actually help us get unstuck and step into the future we've always wanted. Be sure to stop by leadtodaycommunity.com to grab your copy today.
So I do think that, you know, turning the corner here a little bit, I mean, and just a little bit is, I like how you said it, you know, Danny, and it's not just, you know, Kennedy and Bush. It's all of us, right? It's every single one of us. And, you know, even though we're a republic and it takes more work to change a republic than it does a democracy. I mean, all we do is create anarchy and the biggest group wins. But with a republic, it takes a little more tenacity, determination, long-term view, you know, making enough changes in the short term that we have hope, and then having enough mental capacities that we create some long-term. And then Brian's also mentioned a lot, just to kind of catch you guys up, about, you know, the movement to push a lot of these issues to the states. And Brian, I think you were mostly positive about that. I think, if I remember right, I think that I'm still a little bit on the fence on that one. Because I guess I still have some idealism about the United States, right? I still have a little bit of idealism about that.
You know, I just think about this. I mean, we're 5 years going, 6 years now, going out of post COVID-19,
Oh
and
yeah, we
and,
didn't
and
talk
I
about COVID.
yeah, and I think the COVID period there, post now, has been really the catalyst and the pivot point of what we're seeing in education and how kids are post COVID responding to that. Keep in mind, the 1920 year, that was the COVID year. The 2021 year, that year, each of those months when the new school year started, our country, we were losing up to, on average, 30 to 40,000 professionals in the field of public education from like October, November. They were just dropping out. And that was, again, that was the 2021 school year. And we really haven't recovered from that yet. And as a result of that, there's shortages. There's shortages of support for families and for students, and the resources are no longer there, in my opinion, as they used to be. And now we have this rush to fill positions, and I just read just recently in the medical journal that starting in the school year 27-28, they're going to be looking to roll out in some of our more, I'm going to say, more education friendly states. And don't ask me which ones, Jim, because I'm just throwing that out there. You can figure that out. Looking at the test scores, because we talked about test scores too a couple podcasts ago too, where we are in the world. We're still up in the 50 percentile up there, but they're going to roll out mental health screenings for students in public education. And that could be a game changer. Is that the answer 5 years, 6 years later after post-COVID? Is it being prompted because of the numbers that we're seeing?
Can you explain that a little bit? What is that exactly?
A survey, or it's going to be just well, I think the clinicians that I have here that we got, I'm going to bounce to them. But it really what it is, it's something that you can use, a tool that you in education you could use just to kind of do a screening of if there's any red flags. So I'm sure Danny's very familiar. Rachel, you're probably familiar with screening, but those things are, they come with a cost. There's a cost to train, implement, who's going to do them, how do you interpret those that data, that result. But and again, it goes back to what Danny was saying. Again, what's the why behind some of the evaluations and the testing that we have? So now we have another proposal that's going to come out a couple of years down the road to figure out what the heck's going on with our younger generation with anxiety, depression, and trauma and things like that. So, but that's just something that I just read that on Monday. Actually, it just came out that it's being proposed. So, and that's something that parents need to be cognizant and be aware of, because you may or may not agree to it, and you may or may not need to give your permission for your child to participate in it. And that's really important. But if they're screening, all they have to do is a coverall and say, hey, we're going to screen this year for mental health. You let us know if you don't want your child in it. That's the way to get around of getting permission and things like that. So I would bounce back to Rachel and Dan to see what they think about, where we are and what are the potentials of post-COVID right now, and the impact, the effect that we're seeing with the shortages, and parents are getting more involved. And we actually see numbers too going up into cyber education too. Those numbers are increasing. They're not going down. They dropped a little bit after COVID, but they didn't drop back down to pre-COVID numbers, because what that option will offer more so than what a brick and mortar will offer to the families today.
And Rachel and Danny, when you guys comment, also comment on this point that Brian's talking about this mental health screening. I'm just going to be frank, that scares me to death.
One of the things I did when I was still living up in Pennsylvania is I would go into a middle school, and the school guidance counselor had identified certain students that they wanted some more attention to, and I had a group and with some at-risk kids. And what I see, whether you do screening or no screening or whatever, is there needs to be more support. There's not enough support for helping kids and families thrive. I think our culture is one that doesn't allow for much time and space to be a person, and to have emotions and to experience your emotions and to understand them. I just looked briefly at the information about, I think it was Illinois, maybe doing, had this come out that they were going to do screenings for third grade and up. And my first thought was, what are you going to be like? How on earth are you going to do that? And how are you going to respond to the need? How are you going to back that up?
Yeah, and you hit me with something here. Let me just throw this out before I lose the thought, Rachel, and that is this. We talk about going back to profile. So how do we create a baseline or a standard in something like you mentioned with Illinois? I think that's the one I saw too, is how is Illinois going to create, like, what is, I don't know, the line of, okay, you're good, okay, you're not good. I agree with you on that. I think it's a sticky wick here, and who's coming up with this? Why are they coming up with that? Is it because sometimes we like to throw good money at bad ideas? I think we all hear that. We know that uh,
I
phrase, right?
I, I think there is a desire of kids need help. All of us need help. What can we do to help? And so somebody came up. I mean, this seemed like an idea, but and that doesn't. It's like, why not have a class? Take time in a class where, okay, we are going to learn some skills. And actually, now that AI is coming out, they're saying that, oh, actually, these kinds of skills might be really good for students to learn, to be able to better communicate with each other, negotiate, learn about emotions, because AI can't do that very well, if at all. But have the learn, where these issues that are becoming more prevalent, people can get together in a class. Groups are wonderful to work on these, and maybe it's headed by a therapist, maybe not. But again, I don't know.
Danny, your thoughts?
Well, let me go back to testing for a moment. And I worked with wonderful teachers, and I came from the classroom. So I had a very good relationship with my faculties in the couple of schools that I worked as a counselor. But there was always the concern that if I was pulling students, that they would be missing content because we had the PSSAs, the Pennsylvania State Assessments. And, so I often saw kids over lunch, which worked well, or at other times during the day. But it would be tough to get them during academic time because, again, it would reflect not only on the students to score, but then on the teacher. So in order to get kids the help they needed, I was more limited, but it really worked out for me because of the way I worked with the faculty. But I could see it, and I with my other colleagues that were counselors, it's very tough to get kids who were in need of help out of the classroom to get them in a small group or, a regular weekly meeting or what have you. Again, I go to the testing, like because of those high stakes testing, which do we need that in third grade? Like it just sounds ludicrous to me, So, and I'm all for, taking a college entrance exam, but a fourth grade science exam, like what are we doing? So again, I'm going back to the whole system. I'm taking that view from way up here again, that I think that the more local control you can have, the more parents are making the decisions for their community schools, and that states have that ability to, put out their guidelines and what they want to have accomplished as opposed to the federal government. I think the closer you are to the kids, the better.
Yeah, here's what I've heard so far, and what I'm just so everybody understands, I'm pulling from all three episodes. So I know we haven't talked about all this, and I'm coming back to the question: what are these kids struggling with in mental health that's different than what I did? Right? That's kind of the general idea. We're going to move on. I think testing is pretty clear. I think, but it's not just the kids; it's the teachers, it's the parents, it's the administrators. I think that I'm not saying tests in and of themselves are bad, but what we're talking about, you guys, you can have your own opinions. I have mine. I just think it is rooted. Goals are about what, but they don't take us to moral places if the why of those goals is really to edify those that it relates to. And it just smells to me. It just smells. Social media, that's obvious. And we've talked about that on the podcast, some things that parents can do. And a lot of them are and the technology companies are helping with that, to some degree. I don't think we're out of the woods by any means, but there seems to be progress there. Rachel mentioned parenting. I think parenting in general is it's not like we're going to come after parents. We got, I was probably a bit of a helicopter parent, but now we got these parents now where the kid turns around and there's the parent, so it's even beyond. It's like, I forget the name of that movie, but the butler, I think, he said, don't underestimate my sneakiness. Just everywhere you look, there they are. So I just put down, rescuing parents. But, to what Danny was saying, if we keep it local and the parents are getting involved, and this whole idea about who's smarter, with their children, the parents or the teacher, it's just bad that it's gotten to that kind of an argument where we're no longer a team, trying to do this together. So when we hear about all the board meeting night craziness that's gone on, and that blows my mind. Brings me back to the Little League days when things would get out. COVID, I heard on a podcast, COVID didn't change anything, but it accelerated everything. Whatever everything was, whether it was good or bad, there's a lot of trust that's been broken down in our nation because of COVID. Nobody even wants to talk about it. It's just really, really a horrible thing. We also talked in another podcast about how how our institutions are handling, and I forget the acrostic or acronym, whatever the right term is, for the whole equity and inclusivity issues, that the signs on restrooms. I know that is not everywhere, but that's different. People get mad at me, but to me, love and compassion, being loving and being compassionate doesn't mean that I surrender what I would call common sense. I don't know. It's hard to give sound bites, right? Because it's not fair. There's just so much that we could talk about there. But this, Rachel, I know a lot of therapists as friends, and I always steal free sessions from them every time I can. And so I understand the therapist's heart. What I don't trust is try to take this in a reasonable way. Standardization of things that cannot be locally governed, that just scares the heck out of me.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's you can see that that there's a standardization of counseling education with KCRA.
Yeah. We all have a lot of education, so we don't have to go far back into history. Standardization is a mask many times for something very evil, and that's the thing that we have to pay attention to. So here's for fun, before I change the subject and ask you guys. So I asked AI. I said, AI, are there irreplaceable human qualities? And here's what I got. I'm not going to read the description. I'm just going to give you the answer. These are irreplaceable human qualities according to AI in 2025. We'll see what it looks like in 2030. But in 2025, irreplaceable human qualities: moral judgment and wisdom, empathy and compassion, creativity and imagination, relationship and trust building, purpose and meaning making, resilience and faith, moral imagination. And then, of course, sarcastic Jim says, well, at this point in the life of AI, there seems to be a place for humans. Thank goodness. But to be honest, I was kind of closing my eyes to see what was going to pop up. Something like, that has not been proven yet, or something of that nature.
Because AI is based on what humans have created.
Right.
And in creating that, you're right. Do we want those characteristics in it? And those are controllables. We can say what we want and what we don't want because we're going to be the creators of that. And I think that's where the danger. I think that's where it gets a little bit dangerous, that we can almost set the narrative of what AI can and or will not do based on how, maybe how we feel, or what is no longer relevant to how we live our lives or how we make decisions, resolve conflict. How do we deal with our day in and day out problems?
Yeah. And, a basic theology class will teach you that the soul, if you believe in the soul, it is made up of intellect, emotion, and volition or will. And, that's kind of what I was driving at. I was wondering if it was going to really see no need for human decision making, and any kind of judgment and create that. But, with all that's gone on in the world, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but check with me in 5 years. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Okay. Let's talk about this. Anyway, that was kind of my short list of some of the things that, not all of them maybe necessarily, but some of that list is, I think, definitely unique to what the kids are going through today, that we, probably weren't going through those exact things.
Jim? Hey, Jim,
Yes, sir.
can I offer a solution?
Please.
Because again, I've been giving you like a lot of the problems that I see and the change in our world and what have you. But let me tell you a very quick, good story. Because I've had a few parents where their child in school just wasn't cutting it. They really struggled. They couldn't do well on the tests. School was just very hard for them. But some of these kids were the nicest, sweetest, most caring, kind kids you would ever come across. And I would have conversations with the parent and say, they are struggling. I struggled in school. When I would talk with the parents, I would say, you have the battle won, because you're raising a child that is going to be a good person. And I had this quote on my wall. It's a Theodore Roosevelt quote. It was in my office, and it was, "To educate a man in mind and not morals is to educate a menace to society." And I'd look at that quote and I would tell those parents, you're not going to have a menace to society. They may not be a rocket surgeon. They may not do rocket surgery, but they're going to do some great things in this world. We don't know what that is right now. They're going to find their way. And that goes back to everything I said before about that's how it should be for kids. So I guess my solution is, when I say get back to basics, education, families, parents, grandparents, we need to get back to basics. And kids need to get outside and play. They need to interact with each other. They need to be not told how smart they are, but that the effort that they're putting in is great. They need to try things and be allowed to fail. One of the things that we did at our school, we did book studies. My principal was big on doing book studies, and we did The Gift of Failure. And it was a parent book study. But you think about it, how can a child, you had asked, you had mentioned about, young adults today, like they don't want to be leaders. They don't want to take risks. But if kids aren't allowed to fail and learn from their mistakes and move on, they're not going to want to take risks. So we need to get back to those basics, the basics of interacting with each other and manipulating items and getting out in nature. And when you heard me talking about those stories before about teaching Shiloh and those moral dilemmas and whatnot, but I also had kids working in groups and making group projects, and it was the teamwork, working together, and the focus wasn't on the group getting an A, it was on the group making a presentation and everybody learning from it. So when I say get back to basics, it's back to basics of being human. We've lost so much of that through the technology world and through the testing outcomes-based world.
That's good.
I know I sound like I'm a preacher, but
Well, both you and Rachel need to take on this question, because I think it's going to be important for parents and others that are going to be listening into this. And so we obviously know the difference between the definition of chronic and acute, but when it comes to, talk a little bit about chronic anxiety and how we can recognize that versus acute trauma and what that is, and maybe just, kind of some overview of what we should know and how we should, deal with both of those realities in our lives.
Anxiety is often a symptom of trauma, whether it's an acute, like what big trauma like the floods that were in Texas, or ongoing, an experience that happened many times, or, something like poverty is a trauma that is an ongoing difficult experience to live in, because it creates, I'll stop there instead of explaining it. Anxiety can come out of that because anxiety tells our brains, anxious thoughts, that we're not safe and I need to be safe. So they're functional parts of anxiety. And it's when anxiety overworks itself that it is not functional. So it is like if you are in a fire zone or something like that and you feel anxious, that tells you, oh my gosh, I need to run. That takes you to safety. That's functional. It's when you're in an environment where nothing is happening that is putting you in safety, putting you in danger, where it's not functioning.
Yeah, let me say back to what I think I'm hearing. So wordsmithing this differently, what I should say is, if I'm seeing anxiety, I am seeing a symptom of trauma. And then maybe I would say, how would I know whether this is a short-term thing that needs this kind of care versus this is a chronic thing that needs, I'm assuming, a different approach?
So anxiety is not, it's not always related to trauma. It can.
Okay.
Not always. All of it needs care, in the sense that, and I think from my perspective, relationships, good relationships, help, all of it. There are techniques that can be helpful for challenging thoughts. But really, and this is what we've been talking about throughout this podcast, is relationships are what are the best healers for our anxious systems, for traumas, is good, healthy, supportive relationships. They tell us that we're safe. They tell us that we are wanted, needed, comfortable, have things to contribute. And when those are absent, those relationships aren't there, we become more anxious. And that is often what happens in the tension that I was talking about earlier, when in school or in all sorts of places where kids growing up, they struggle with, am I acceptable? And to my parents, to my peers, as who I am? Do I need to be somebody else? And how do I move through that?
Yeah. So connecting your comments to what Danny was saying about the classrooms he tried to create, is he trying to create that safety in community, that acceptance in community, and that in itself can be very therapeutic for a lot of the undercurrent,
Yes.
that happens in us, especially as we're growing up. and trying to figure out our place in life. So in other words, seeing the importance of healthy environments for these kids is really important, to kind of study how the classroom is handled, how recess is handled, how the home is handled, the neighborhood, the ball team, all of those kinds of things can become support mechanisms for that. Danny, what would you add to that?
As Rachel was saying everything, the thing that I kept thinking about was, and that you're not alone.
Oh yeah.
That's the big one. You're not alone.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back now to technology. Technology makes us be alone. Kids are alone. Like when Rachel was saying before about kids will be on their phone and it's their way of connecting and it's away from parents. And it's true, but they're alone. And when I say in that sense alone, like, and Jim, when you were describing your childhood, fears of the Cold War, and I remember going under the desks, and I remember the teacher putting down the shade, and we're like, why you do that? Well, when the windows blow out, it'll keep some of the glass in there. Like that's what I was learning when I was in fourth grade. So everything that you were talking about, and the fear
when all hell breaks loose, this is,
or even worse than that, asking out a girl and she would say no in high school.
Right.
But my point is,
those girls are wicked. I'm telling you, they hold us in their hands.
But my point is, when you're in middle school or you're in high school, and or even in elementary school with my kids with something else, but I was thinking about the whole like girlfriend thing that you brought up earlier. If you're with your friend and you're walking down the hall and you're talking about it, and he wants to ask her out, but he's nervous. You're like, oh, you are too. You're nervous. I'm nervous too. You're there and you're in the moment and you're with somebody and they're not alone. You're not alone. You're living that life together. Mm-hmm. And you don't have that when you're online and you're typing things out. It's a different world. Summing all back up is technology has forced kids to be alone. It's sheltered them away from that interaction, that human interaction, which when you said, what does AI not have that humans have? And I was thinking love, compassion, empathy, all of those things.
Yeah.
That's what we get when we're with each other, and we're losing that.
Brian, Brian, as an administrator, how do you communicate? How do you give permission? How do you paint a picture for teachers in creating environments like this that we're talking about? Do you get the opportunity to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I oversee mental health programs and special education programs, and relationship and one-on-one with your instructor or your para assistant or whoever you're working with in those classrooms. You certainly have to rely on a relationship, and that's encouraged. I mean, we talk about the tangibles, the intangibles, and those are things. I mean, that's the foundation for everything. If you can build a relationship, work together, and communicate, and be collaborative and cordial, the opportunity is going to be amazing. It's you're going to grow. You're going to achieve. As Danny said, I like what he talked about. It's what the poster said. You may not be that surgeon scientist, but you're going to be able to go and figure it out by communicating, by talking, and those are really important points. And going back to COVID, we didn't have that. We didn't see that. We have a generation of children right now that they didn't get to ride in kindergarten on the bus to go to school. They just didn't. They didn't experience that. Parents didn't experience that with them. Here we go. We're talking about the correlation, the relationship of everything. In professional development with professionals today in the field, we talk about, let's put everything aside. Let's focus on what's in front of you. Let's talk about what the needs of your students are. And there's a mountain and valley to that. And Danny could join in on that because he has the years experience as a teacher, as a counselor. That, you know, years ago when we all got into this education gig, it was a different game. Now it's a game changer. Things have changed. I mean, I was thinking about what he was saying. We've lost, for example, we don't even have the time in the schedule, not just for play, not just for relationships. We don't even have the space in a 6.5, 7 hour schedule of school to do any more like programs that were extremely beneficial when I grew up, when you grew up. That was like the DARE program. We don't do those anymore. They're gone because we can't fit them in. So as an administrator, I have to tell the teachers, okay, we're going to get tested on this, so let's teach this instead. But we probably are going to see kids benefit more from this, which is going to be like a DARE program. Talk about drugs and alcohol and the pitfalls of it and how to avoid and how to make really good, sound decisions. So we're not doing that. And there's a conflict in education with teachers of just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I don't even have to think about it anymore. Just tell me what I need to do. And students become compromised. The interest of students become compromised today. So we have to sometimes come around, and there's always that pushback. I could tell you stories of pushback setting up professional development with hundreds of teachers going over the same topic at the same time, sitting in the same room, and the pushback of that. Some saying, well, that doesn't relate to me. I don't know why I'm here. Well, you know, I'll listen, but I'm going to do my to-do list. You know, I mean, it's tough today to teach adults about kids and how to work with them and how they think today and things that we have to consider, reconsider, and take a look at.
Back to Rachel. Rachel, there was a thought that I had while you and Danny were, speaking to the issue, at a lower elevation, is that, don't you think it's true that some kids actually find safety in isolation?
Yeah.
Yeah. Until they don't, I guess.
I think there are very few total hermits. But there are plenty of kids where school can be hard with, the amount of stimulation and things like that. But all of us are relational. We're social, and figuring out how a child fits in with that. I mean, I had a really rambunctious household growing up. I was the only girl with 3 brothers and other people in and out. And so I spent a lot of time reading by myself, but I always enjoyed it most when I was reading in a room with other people.
Huh. Yeah, I don't think I could do that. Yeah, if you're in the room, I can't concentrate. I don't know why.
I can't concentrate unless I do it, but I have always wanted other people to be in a room with other people in order to focus on the work I'm doing. Because I just grew up with other people around.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? It shows the power of our conditioning. We're coming close to the end. I want to say some summary thoughts, and then ask you guys one more question, if you would be so kind to grace me with a little bit more time. So I mentioned this when we were offline, that in the business world, one of the things that we are noticing is that seems along the younger generation, a push against capitalism. I don't know how much the media has blown that up and how much of that is real. I don't, but I never really heard about it, even 5 years ago, before COVID. And I do think it's true that fewer and fewer aspire to take these risks that we've talked about earlier, and you guys have commented on that. Remote work is definitely popular. It doesn't seem to be going away as a preference. And I'm assuming what that really means is not isolation, but independence and flexibility. But I wonder if it is, more isolation. I kind of wonder about that, sometimes. I want you guys to think about that. because I want to re-engage you, down the road. Is this particular thing being blown up out of proportion, or is this all part of the same movement, that we're talking about? But here's where I'd like to end. So, well-meaning parents, they're trying to figure all this out too. I mean, they've got everybody in their ear about what school they should go to, why, and Rachel, as you started out, we've got folks that are holding kids' hands, and they're they've graduated from college. I see it every day. They've graduated from college, and the parents are still holding their hands. Their schedules are crazy, absolutely crazy. Now, this was around when I was a youth pastor, but it just seems to be more widespread. So it might have been just the big time jocks, when I was a youth pastor. Now, you name it. I mean, you name it: pickleball, chess, robotics. It's just these kids have no space, none. I wonder how many even know how to start a lawnmower. I, not being judgmental, I just wonder. And Brian started off with saying, parents really need to study their kids, right? Really need to try to understand their kids. And then when we were offline, Rachel, I believe you're the one that mentioned Proverbs 22:6. And so, which comes to the same idea that Brian was, talking about, to train up a child in the way he should go. And when he is older, he will not depart from it. And most Christians would read that as a call towards the 10 Commandments, morality, et cetera, et cetera. And we're not saying that it's not saying that, but a more careful study teaches us that it's more holistic than that God's hands is on every soul, and he bends them a certain way. And the more we can notice that and affirm that, the more confidence and strength and courage, what is encouragement but courage, right? That comes from that. So what would you guys do? What would you guys say? How would you coach and encourage parents? And I'd like all three of you to take a shot at that before we say goodbye on this episode, all in regards to mental health. I know you all three empathize with parents. So how would you try to encourage them, coach them?
I'll start. I was just listening to a Jordan Peterson podcast, and he was explaining to parents how when you have a young child, and I'm going to kind of butcher the way he said this, but he was basically saying there's nobody in the world that you'll pour more of yourself into and that you love more than this child. And that child feels the same way towards you. And that what a gift that is if you can nurture that and make that grow is the gist of what Jordan Peterson was saying. And I thought about that, and oftentimes as a school counselor, the parent would come to me and say, "Can you talk to us?" He won't listen to me, kind of thing. And a lot of times I would coach the parents on just, listen to your child and have a conversation with your child and validate their concerns and try to see where they're coming from and just open those doors of communication. So I think that is the biggest thing, is just make the time, talk with them, explain things. The more you pour into them, the more joyous and rewarding it will be.
That's good.
Go ahead, Rachel. I'll wait for last.
Okay. I would encourage parents to slow down and be curious, model curiosity, be curious about their children, your children, invite them to share. Yeah, think about what you really want specifically what you want to help cultivate in your children. So many parents say, I want them to be happy. And that puts an awful lot of pressure on children because then they feel like I have to be happy. They need to be able to have all of their emotions. And so, and notice your own anxiety as parents. Work on managing your own anxiety and don't make your own anxiety your child's anxiety.
Let me add something to what Rachel just said. So many times, if I had a nickel for every time I said this to a parent, I said, monitor your feelings because your children are looking to you. And if you're feeling anxious, they're going to be anxious. And I used the example. I said, I remember when 9/11 happened and Rudy Giuliani was the mayor. And he said everybody around him was losing their minds. And he said he had to purposely get calmer to make everybody else around them calmer. So whether it was, working with parents and a traumatic situation, home or what have you, I would use that as that example and say, when things are out of control, get calmer because your child's going to be looking to you.
I needed to hear that 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago.
Well, let me part with this, Jim. I mean, as the song goes, the commercial jingle that we're seeing this time of the year, it certainly is the most wonderful time of the year. And that is, it's not the holiday season yet, but it's going back to school. And, it's tough to be a parent. It's tough to be a child, a student. It's tough to be a grandparent, more so now than ever before, especially on the first day of the first week, the first month of school. We heard some really good feedback from our clinicians, those that are in the trenches dealing with the anxiety, the depression, and the trauma, and some pretty strong messages that we're telling parents, and that's the whole thing is reach out, do your outreach as a parent, as a grandparent, a caregiver of a child or children that are going back to school, and ensure that you're in a good place so they can continue to be in a great place as they have that renewal of just another school year. And on top of that, it's get to know people in the school system. If it's a new building, if it's a new school, if it's new district for you or new neighborhood, get to know your resources, what your sources are out there, and tap into those. And again, what we talked about, you heard from both Rachel and Dan, and that is going to be about relationships. And children need today to see adults be able to work through relationships. If it's difficulty in the house or in the family or in the neighborhood, children need to see models of that. They have to see what it looks like. And we could talk about it, hey, well, do this with your child. But I mean, God has given us two eyes, two ears, and one mouth. And we want our children to use it to that capacity because they're going to be able to hear and see a lot of what we're talking about. And it begins in the home. And it could be a single parent home. It could be a blended family. It just doesn't matter. Children today, kids today need to see adults in a positive light. They need to see them as problem solvers, being resilient, working through, being compassionate for one another. They need to see that because that's the foundation of what it's going to be for them moving forward. I said to a friend of mine, it's her responsibility as a single mom, as a parent, the two young girls, it's her responsibility to teach her two daughters everything that she knows. Teach them everything that you know, good, bad, and just healthy things, but teach them everything that you know, because that's what is going to continue the legacy. It's going to continue to assist other members of the family and so on and so forth, and they're gonna thrive off of that. So I want to thank Rachel and Dan for joining us, and it's been fantastic. These are really strong, bright people that they pay their dues, and that it's For some of us, it's like comparable to dog years, and there's no doubt that these two individuals here with us today have really seen the muck, let's say. And I'm grateful that they're here, and so appreciative for them to be a part of our discussion today.
One more question.
Go.
So I asked my child, how was school today? And I get that same answer all the time. Good. What do I do?
Don't ask them, how was school today? Say, tell me something that happened in school today.
But much better.
Or
And even better than that, as the parents say, you know what happened to me today? And tell your story. Then say, tell me something that happened to you today.
Oh, good. Rachel?
or another way with younger kids is draw a picture of something that happened today.
Oh, that's scary.
And I'll draw a picture too.
That means I'll have to manage my emotions when I see them draw a bully, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jim, I would say tell me one thing only that you learned today. It doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter what it is. You learned today that your teacher's favorite food is pizza. Well, that's something that you learned today. But at least it's something. I think that's the story starter for me. So.
Well, I'm going to try that with my 40-year-old son and my 38-year-old daughter, and we'll see how it goes. Appreciate you guys so much today. Thanks for being on the Today Counts show. We're going to continue to try to promote good things, to be an antidote to this mental health for our kids. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jim.
Here.
Got it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us on the Today Counts show. We got so much more planned for you. So stay tuned and stay connected on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. And remember, today counts.